Good morning and welcome back to the channel. This is Robert at Retro Car Guy 530, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate the customization of the wiring for a Web Electric Products BLP-1 generic brake light pulsar module. I showed the functionality of this type of module in my other channel video for third brake light pulsars, and after I uploaded that video I was contacted by some Chevy SS owners asking how I made it a plug-and-play unit for the Chevy SS Sedan. So I still have some of the connectors available for it, so I'm going to customize a couple for those owners. So I bought another unit so that I can start that process and film it and demonstrate how fairly straightforward it should be. And I'll clarify the part numbers and everything necessary for the connectors used with the Chevy SS Sedan. So after the intro, I'll show all the parts and tools I believe to be necessary to perform this task, and then a little bit later I'll show the dropping of the headliner, enough to get the access to the third brake light, and the general installation process for the brake light pulsar on the Chevy SS Sedan. So let's get to work. Please review the automotive information, repair, and modification guidelines on this screen. Seek the advice of a repair professional if you're unsure how to perform any repair or modification safely and correctly. All repairs and modifications are performed at your own risk. Here are the items I believe to be involved in the customization of the wiring for the Web Electric Products BLP-1 generic brake light pulsar module. So it's a plug-and-play unit for the Chevrolet SS Sedan. So let's go over what's on the table. And I have my soldering iron, solder, protective glasses, and gloves. I'm going to solder in a wire that bridges the third brake light ground, the brake light pulsar module ground that goes then to the wiring harness connector end on the car. I prefer to solder such connections to make sure there's no intermittent connectivity, especially for a brake light. So then I have my black wire that I'll be using for that wire that I just mentioned. Any electrical tape if I need any. Probably won't be using any red wire, but we'll see. My crimping tool that I'll be using for the pins that go into the connectors on the brake light end and the car end for the new connectors I'm adding. My wire stripper. And then I have the screwdrivers that I'll be using. I'll be using a Torx T20 to remove the grab handle screws and also the screw in the C-pillar behind the decorative cover. I have the flat blade screwdriver there that I'll be using to remove that decorative cover. Just be gentle with it. It should pop off almost instantaneously with very little pressure. The Torx T20 socket that I have put together there on my 1/4-inch drive, I'll be using that to remove the screws that hold the third brake light to the headliner. I need it kind of short like that so I can reach up and over the headliner while I'm sitting in the back seat, so that makes that possible. And then here is the BLP-1 module itself, and the connections for this basically are the red wire here is the connection from the car. So the wiring harness that comes from the vehicle has the 12 volt input to this. This is the 12 volt out to the brake light itself, and then this is the ground wire for the module. So I'll be modifying this so that this ground wire and the third brake light ground then go to the connector on the car side. So I'll be cutting off this connector end. Again, this is a generic unit that's meant for a variety of vehicles, so you have to do a little customization here. The connectors that come with the thing, there's some wire caps and then some wire splices, wire taps that come with it, but I won't be using those today. And potentially I could be using the zip ties, but depends on your installation. With the headliner installation for the Chevy SS, it tends to have to lay on the headliner, and I'll usually use some sort of foam tape to keep everything snug up there so it doesn't bounce around. Now, in relation to the connectors being used, I had mentioned in my previous video that I had installed this into a G37X, an Infiniti G37X, and I did. And those were the connectors that are actually somewhat difficult to locate. The Yazaki connectors, which I had to get some samples to allow me to do that type of connection for that. So those are not the ones actually used in the Chevy SS. So if that was unclear in the previous video, I apologize. This is for G37X or probably other Infiniti. The JDM connectors are very hard to get here in the States, so luckily I was able to find a sales rep that was taking pity on me to get them. So that's for that vehicle, not for the Chevy SS. The connectors involved for the Chevy SS are the following ones here. On the car end of the connection, we have the for the harness coming into the car harness. This is the connector for that. That's 120476663-B. Then the terminal pins that go into that are 120475881-L. And then there is a retaining clip for the pins to make sure they don't get pulled out, and that's 120476665-B. So that's the car end of the connection. The third brake light end of the connection is as follows. 120476662-B is this connector here for the third brake light end. The 120477767-L are the pins that go into that connector. And then the retaining clip for that connector is 120476664-B. So if I've left anything out or forgotten something, misrepresented any description of anything, I'll put some overlay text over this in the video. Hopefully I didn't get it wrong, but we should have everything on this table necessary to perform the task at hand, other than physically removing the headliner, pulling it down from the roof, and that's what we're going to go do now. So let's switch to that. So now we're here in the back seat of the Chevy SS Sedan. I'm going to show you where you need to remove 3 Torx screws on each side. I'm going to show you the passenger side, but it's identical on the driver's side. And that will allow the headliner to be pulled down. There's some clips on the headliner connecting it to the roof, but these are the only things that need to be removed as far as screws. I usually also pull down the weather stripping to allow the headliner to be able to droop down a bit as well. So I'm going to get going and remove those screws. So let's get to work. And this is where I use a flat blade screwdriver. There's a little recess here that you can pop this out. And with that, you can then use the same Torx, the T20 Torx screwdriver, to remove the screw. That's the screw from the C-pillar. Now in my case, I'm going to disconnect the wire that goes to the rear Thinkware F800 Pro 2-channel dash cam for the rear here. So I'm going to remove that cable here and take it out of its clips. So normally you wouldn't have this wire here, nor the camera, unless you have that same type of dash camera with a 2-channel camera in the back. But so those are the screw items that need to remove. Like I said, I also tend to pull down the weather stripping here to allow the headliner to droop down a bit. But the other part of this is you need to pull the C-pillar out, the trim piece out enough to let it droop down a bit. So that's as far as you really want to go with it. If you go any more, there's a plastic clip at the bottom of that you'll need to deal with, and if you don't watch out, you can possibly pull it out and it will drop down into the trunk area. Don't ask me how I know that. But I'm going to repeat this process on the driver's side, and then we'll show you pulling down the headliner once I get everything removed. Now I have the screws removed from the grab handles on both sides of the vehicle, as well as the C-pillar trim piece on both sides, and I popped them both out of the top here. And there's no need to remove the dome light here. On my 15 SS Sedan, I was under the impression that you had to do that, but no, you can leave that intact as it is. So with this, you should be able to reach your hands up in here on both sides, grab in a bit, because the clips that you're wanting to release are a little bit beyond the edge. You don't want to grab the edge and pull, because you could bend the headliner. So you pull down on the brake light area, and the clips have released, and that's released the third brake light. So for anyone that's trying to fix the foam seal around the edge of the third brake light, that's all you really need to do to drop that enough to get that back in place and then pop it back into place. Well, so with that, I'm going to cut away to the outside so you can see where the 3 screws are. I'm going to try to remove to drop the third brake light from the headliner. So let's see if we can get enough light on here to make this meaningful. There's one clip. Hopefully you can see that, where I just removed that from pulling down on the headliner, and there's a corresponding version of that over here. So now I'm going to use this Torx T20 socket on my 1/4-inch drive to reach up over the third brake light in the headliner area to remove the screws from the third brake light so I can separate. There's some interlocking tabs there. You have to be careful it just doesn't drop off, so you have to remove the screws and then angle it a little bit to get it off of the headliner. So I'm going to do that now. So this will probably be a little boring, so let's speed this up. So with the three screws removed, I was able to wiggle out these little pins that are on each, or the alignment pins that are on each end. There's some holes that they go into, of course, on the headliner. So you just kind of have to pull back a little bit and wiggle it down, but do it gently so you don't break these off. And then you can see the connector here for the third brake light. And there's a release pin here, which is a bit delicate. I've already had to adjust this one a little bit. But the connector end from the original harness goes into that. And since mine already has a brake light pulser, you're seeing my previously modified pulser connector end in here. So you need to release that a little bit, and then that unplugs. And then there's the third brake light for the Chevy SS. And as I was mentioning, some owners have mentioned that this foam piece gets a little, gets undone from the brake light unit itself. So if you're just trying to adjust that, put it back into place, make sure you get it on the edges. You drop the headliner up to the point of removing. You don't have to remove the third brake light, you just adjust it as necessary. You can go outside the vehicle and take a look at it and make sure it's all looking good. And then of course clean the window before you put anything up there, because your hands tend to get contact with the glass, leave some oil, so clean it before you put everything back together. So with that, you can see that here is the connector end on the third brake light. The connector from the wiring harness that we're going to be putting together is this part here. And so with this out, I'm going to go ahead and remove this one, and I'm going to go in and modify the one that I have sitting on the table in there, and then bring it back out here to verify that it works. So let's cut to the footage of me putting together the wiring harness. Alright, now we're going to put the connectors into the side that goes into the third brake light. Here's the connector for that. So ground is on the side with the ridge, which is here, and I've got the ground wire. Alright, let's push that in. That's snapped into place. And then the positive, the white wire from the pulsar goes in a similar fashion. Yes. And then goes in this way. So they're both in there. And now I will use the retaining clip to hold that in there. And that goes on the opposite side here. And clips into that little recess there. So those won't be able to come out. And the same is true here. That clip on the car side clips into there, so those pins won't be able to come out. So the only thing we have left to do is to solder the connector, which now that I've I'm going to put tape around it. I'll solder it and then put tape instead of the heat shrink coating, but there we go. So now that shouldn't come apart at all. I'll let that cool down. And next thing we should do is, once I get that taped up, I'll go take the third brake light out to the SS, plug it in, and see how we did. So now we're going to test the brake light pulser by plugging it in to the third brake light and the car harness. So I'm going to invoke the assistance of a remote brake pedal pusher, and that happens to be this long broom handle that I have here, so if you see my arm reaching over, you know what I'm doing for that. But so here's the unit. I taped it up. This seemed to be just fine. So again, we have the car side, the part that connects to the car, part that connects to the brake light itself, and then the module encased in this rubber material. But I anticipate putting it with this length of material over to the side over here, so we'll see how that works out in just a moment. But first, let's test, make sure it works. So let's get the car side plugged in, and let's plug it in here. So that's as easy as it should be. So now, with the fine assistance of my broom handle here, there it is. Let off, and I reapply. It should be steady, and it is. If I let off and not hit the camera, let's give it about 15 seconds and wait for it to time out the pulsing module. So it will pulse again. That's all working. Alright, let's try to do initial fitment up with the shorter wire run that I have here, make sure that all works. So, well, next you'll see is with the third brake light up, sitting up there where it normally sits, and I'll be commenting on how well it fit. Alright, we're going to attempt to see what's going on here on the routing. The lighting is not optimal here, but the wiring placement seems to be decent. The only thing to be careful of, the clips that actually hold the headliner to the roof are very close to where I have the pulsar laying. I'm laying the pulsar all the way over on the edge, just beyond the plastic piece there from the headliner. So I would suggest putting some protective foam padding or something in there just to make sure the plastic doesn't cut into the wires. And there's the connector for the right here is the connector coming from the car side. There's the third brake light connection, and then the clips are on either side. So I would also suggest putting some foam tape on the connectors so it doesn't rattle around, because normally it's already connected to the third brake light. Now it's going to be loose from that, so I was able to push this up and have the clips snap in like they should. So I think things are good. I'll just make sure that the wiring harness is fully taped up to the module, and there's some foam padding on the plastic there, and then on the clip there to make sure that it doesn't rattle around. So it looks like this was successful. You can now see the headliner and third brake light with the original BLP unit that I had in my SS. And you can also see this extra piece of foam padding which was on the cable from my dash camera. So I put that back in place as well, which is what's running here. This is for the dash camera, and it goes out through the gap right there to the camera that's on the rear window. So again, you'd want to make sure once you got the third brake light and all the screws in place, because you tend to hit the glass as you're doing that, one, that it's clean still, and then two, that you haven't taken the foam piece and somehow brushed it and with your arm and then rolled it off, the glue didn't stick or something to keep it in place. So before you get beyond this point, check again, clean again if necessary the window, just to make sure no arm oil or fingerprints or anything are left up there. So my BLP unit's right there. Like I said, mine's just a hair longer because I didn't want to redo a couple solder joints on my original BLP unit. So with that, I've cleared the clips. So I've got the clip here. Okay, there we go. So there's a corresponding part that clips into up here, and then there's another one on the other side. So make sure the clips are clear, and I will clear the metal here by pulling this all the way back up against the third brake light. So that is now free to clip back into place. So we got all the things in place that we need to have in place before we button it up here, which is pretty straightforward. So I'm going to go through those steps now and speed it up probably in editing to make you less bored while I'm doing it. But the simple parts are: one, confirm that the wire is out of place, which we've done as far as the clips. Then you're going to push the headliner up to get the clips engaged. And then you're going to put the headliner up on the edges. You can put the door seals back into place to help hold it up. Put the screws in for the grab handles. Put the C-pillar trim back in place by snapping it into place. There's a couple snaps on the upper end. And then put the screw in place and put the caps back in place. And you're done. So let's get going on that. Okay, there's push 1, 2. So both of those are engaged. Third brake light is up against the window. I'm going to route my dash camera wire, which you may or may not have, but I do. That's done. Alright, with the headliner you can push up on each side and then re-engage the actually most of the trim. That helps hold it up at least. You might want to leave it down just a hair to get the C-pillar trim back into place. Now we're going to put the grab handle screws back in place with the T20 Torx, and I believe you can see this on both sides, so here we go. And you're done. And on this screen you can see the parts that were used in today's video. Of course, the main component was the Webb Electric Products BLP-1 generic brake light pulsar. I've purchased units from that company over the last decade or so and I've had no problems, so I highly recommend them. If you wish to install a different brake light pulsar, of course the wiring may change a little bit, but the general concept is the same. And the connectors that are necessary to adapt any module into the third brake light you can see on the screen as well. I purchased those from terminalandconnectors.com back in 2015, and I was able to purchase them in small quantities. So if you choose to do this project, you should be able to obtain them from there or any other source on the internet that sells them. So hopefully this video has been helpful to you to explain what's necessary to make it SS specific, and if nothing else, you now know how to bring down the headliner and the third brake light to fix the foam piece around it. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button. If you're stopping by the channel for the first time and you want to, please subscribe. Click that bell icon to get notified when I upload new videos. Please follow Retro Car Guy 530 on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks for taking the time to visit the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.